In today's lesson, I'm going to demonstrate the hammer-on technique. I'm going to show you how to practice it so that your hammer-ons sound clear, clean, and have precise timing. And I'm also going to show you how to use them in a song, because a lot of the time people learn things like hammer-ons simply because they're challenging. But when it comes time to actually use them in a song, you don't know how or where to use it. So I'm going to show you some really common musical scenarios at the end of this lesson. Stay tuned for that. Real quick before we get started, if you've not yet downloaded your copy of my free ebook covering all the basics of lead guitar, I'll put a link to that in the corner and down below. And if you enjoy learning guitar with me, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, say hi in the comments. There are many ways to perform a hammer-on. As you just saw, there's so many different variables here. We're using different fingers on different strings, on different places of the fretboard. And when you add that all up, it can be overwhelming. So I recommend choosing one or two that resonate with you the most, or that you're going to find the most useful. And by the way, I've made a worksheet with all the tabs and everything for this lesson, and I've put that on my Patreon page. There's a link to that down below if you want something that you can kind of print off. Anyways, for now, I feel it's best to start with two basic types of hammer-on. Going from your index to ring finger, like you would with a pentatonic scale for your favorite riffs and solos. And going from an open string to one of your fingers in the context of a chord shape, like you would during any sort of folk music, you know? Let's start on the 5th fret of the D string with our index finger. And then we're going to place our ring finger on the 7th fret. And you're going to want to use the tip of your finger. So I want you to take a moment and get the positioning right. You know, make sure that you're sitting up straight, your guitar neck is up a little bit. Your fingertip for your index. You're using your fingertip on the 5th fret, right beside the fret. Your thumb is sort of behind the 6th fret, and then your ring finger can go down on the 7th fret. And you want to have both your fingers down at the same time, both your fingertips. Like I said, you take the time to adjust. If this is too much, you can always try it in a different place. Like you can slide up the fretboard. The frets get smaller here, but we're going to do it down here for now. You can always just adjust this afterwards. You want to pluck the string while your index is down, and then you add your ring finger to the 7th fret. And you make a hammer motion. And a great way to test this is you just turn your guitar around. You have your index finger down, and you just knock. It's like knocking on the door. Use your ring finger and listen. You want it to make a sound. You know, if you can hear like a little thud, like boom, 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 like this, that means you're giving it the right hammering motion. And then you try that on the actual string. And the challenge is going to be getting the same part of your fingertip to hit the string every time. And something that really helps with that is you don't want to lift your fingers too high. You know, but I can barely aim when I move my finger, like, I don't know how far that is, but pretty far, right? You just want to be like an inch or, 2 centimeters or so, a little less than an inch above the fretboard. And the more you practice, the smaller you can make that motion. Ultimately, a good benchmark, your goal is to have the hammer-on have the same volume as when you pluck the string. And that's a two-way street. You can pluck the string a little bit softer. Some people give her like that. And your hammer-ons are never really going to be the same volume as that, right? So pluck a little bit softer and practice your hammer-on till it's about the same volume as when you pluck the string, and that'll make your playing sound a lot more consistent. Another way to test it is if you can activate the string without even plucking it. So just kind of punching the string with that finger. You can also practice it with your middle finger instead of your ring finger, but usually you're going to be going from your index to your ring finger, especially when you're doing the pentatonic pentatonic scale. And that's the technique side of it. But just as important is the rhythm side of it. They can be timed in two basic ways. As a grace note, where you basically do the hammer-on as quickly as possible. It is treated like a single note. Even though technically there's two notes there, we treat it just like a single note. Jeez, I'm just throwing my pick around. Going like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The other way you'll see it being used is where each of those notes is given some amount of rhythm, usually like an eighth or a quarter note, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So you'll want to practice it those two ways. Just count 1, 2, 3, 4. Just do 3 of them and then give yourself a break on beat 4. And you can do that on the A string, on the D string, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then on the G string. The other way that we can time it is by giving each of those notes some amount of rhythm, usually an eighth or a quarter note. So we could go 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. And I would do it just like that on each of the strings, on the D string, and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So I'm plucking my note, my starter note, with my index finger. I'm plucking that on beat 1, and then on the and after 1, I'm putting down my ring finger. 1 and 2 and. And then you can go between strings with either of those exercises. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, when it comes to using them musically, what we just practiced applies very nicely to the pentatonic scale. And if you want more info on how to solo with that scale, there's a lesson in the corner. You can follow along with that one and insert some hammer-ons into it. It's really simple. Now, the other way that we use hammer-ons all the time is with the basic chords. We'll start by isolating the technique. So, for example, on a C chord, we would hammer on from the open string to our middle finger on the second fret of the D string. That's one of the notes in the C chord. And first we would isolate just that motion. So we have the open D string, and then we're going to hammer with our middle finger. And I find it's really helpful if my knuckle touches underneath the fretboard there. That way I have like a pivot point. If it's just my thumb on the back, it's a little bit tougher. It's still possible, but I find that helps a lot. If you're ready for hammer-ons, you probably have the strength in this part of your hand to switch. I don't want to get too much into chords, but basically when we're getting started, you have your thumb on the back of the neck, you have a nice bit of space underneath your palm there. But as you get better, you can kind of bring your thumb up over the top, use it to mute. And that's where the position that we'll be in when it comes to playing hammer-ons. So we have the open string and we practice hammering to the second fret. And then we're going to hold our C chord shape. And we're not going to bother strumming the chord, but we are going to get in the correct position, get our fingers curled enough so that our ring finger isn't muting. Because if it's flopping, your ring finger kind of mutes the D string. So it needs to be curled enough. We lift our middle finger, pluck the D string, and then we can strum the chord and hammer into it. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and. So there, we're hammering into the note. Another way is to play a hammer-on within the strumming pattern in some way. So we start off with our C chord. We're not hammering or anything. We play like down, down, and then we do a hammer-on, that same one, and then we do another downstroke. So we're playing it within the pattern, like 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the hammer-on, we pluck the open string on beat 3, and we hammer on the end of 3. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. For beat 1, I'm just going to hit the thicker strings. 1, 2, 3. And if you do that like with a, you know, a bit quicker, that's great. We can also do that same kind of deal with a D chord, but here we would use our index. So O2 on the G string, and first you would practice just the hammer, then you make the shape, just the hammer, and then you can either, you know, that's a cool way to do it, just get into the chord like that, just adds a little inflection, we would call that. Or we could go down, down, same thing we did with the C chord, down, down, hammer, down. Basically, you have your shape and you leave one of your fingers off at first or within the shape at some point, and then you add a hammer on. And one of my favorite uses of this is in Elliot Smith's Condor Avenue. He does it for the root of the C chord, so that would be on the A string. And we can also, as we're playing chords, especially in the key of like G, using a G or an E minor chord, we can play open pentatonic riffs, and we tend to do that on the A, D, and G strings, going O2 on each of those strings. You know, so you have your G chord, you know, if you ever learn Wish You Were Here, that's like 90% of it, you know, that's the intro riff, right? Just the G or the E minor chord plus a bit of the pentatonic scale. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. There's a worksheet for all this on my Patreon page with all these exercises mapped out. Don't forget to grab your copy of my free ebook for lead guitar, or if you're interested in taking your lead playing to the next level, I have a course, The Complete Lead Guitarist, available on my website. I'll put a link to that in the corner and down below. Please take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy learning guitar with me. Have a fun time practicing, and I'll see you soon.